The PlayStation 5 Pro feels almost inevitable now. New leaks seem to reveal its design and an official announcement could happen at the next state of play. But do we really need a Pro version of a console that hasn't yet made a significant impact? We're talking about a console with no price cuts in nearly 4 years, where half the player base remains on the PlayStation 4. And I made a video about the current gen a few weeks ago, so if you want to see a longer version of my thoughts about it, check that out. In a nutshell, this generation made a lot of promises, but the amount of cross-gen games shows that not much has really changed. Exclusive games are nearly a thing of the past, and we are still waiting for the defining game of this generation, likely GTA 6, which, if not delayed, won't even release until next year. And I know I'm going to get a certain type of comment in this video, so let me address it straight away. Yes, I know that buying a PlayStation 5 Pro is optional and no one is being forced or required to buy one, and it's not a mandatory upgrade. Now, don't let me discourage you. If you were about to leave that kind of comment, please do it anyway, cause that helps push the video further. But I think the whole reaction to the PS5 Pro has been too accepting, without much reflection about its necessity, or if we are just pushing another trend that has a negative impact on us and on consoles in general. And there's also this overall feeling that we're just expected to pay more and more, but get less and less in return. Video games used to be pretty straightforward. You generally wouldn't have the absolute best performance, games were a bit pricier than on PC, you wouldn't be able to use mods, and you couldn't access different online stores. But all you had to do was pop in the disc or install the game and play. You wouldn't have to worry about hardware upgrades, messing with config files, poorly timed Windows updates, or anti-cheat software. You bought the console and that will be your main system up until the end of that generation. Sure, we had revisions and slim versions along the way, but those mainly made the console smaller, allowed for price drops, improved energy efficiency, and fixed known issues. Some revisions were pretty impactful, like the revised 360 models with HDMI and built-in Wi-Fi, plus the red ring of death fixes and extra storage. It was also really interesting to see how far those consoles will be pushed as developers got more familiar with the hardware and came up with better tools. But in the last generation we had a change in direction. We would now have Pro versions of the existing consoles. In fairness, we could say that it made sense, because during that generation people were switching from 1080p or even 720p TVs to 4K displays, and the Xbox One was underpowered in comparison to the PlayStation 4, so the more powerful hardware and the extra storage as games were getting bigger made sense for both consoles. In general, even though they weren't the majority of sales, we could say that they helped increase the lifespan of that generation, and looking back, it would also have been quite useful in the 7th gen, which was plagued by performance issues. Fast forward to the current gen and you've bought a console with 8K and 4K at 120Hz printed on the box. Now, Sony is basically saying that you need a new machine to actually achieve that. It feels like buying the console once isn't enough anymore, now you have to upgrade it too. And it doesn't look like Microsoft is going to do the same, so it's not about keeping up with the competition. This time, Sony will be the only one doing this. As I said in the intro, no one's forcing you to buy it, but let me ask you this, do you really think the issue in this generation so far is the lack of higher resolutions and frame rates, or rather the quality and quantity of the games themselves? There is certainly a common feeling that this generation might be the worst one we've had so far, both in terms of impactful innovations and also in the leap from games from the previous generation. Another sign of it is that, at least visually, games like Uncharted 4 and Red Dead Redemption 2 still serve as a benchmark for current games. When you see some recent releases that went terribly wrong, such as Saints Row, Skull and Bones, Redfall, Forspoken, and other big budget projects, the problem was not that the current hardware cannot allow those games to fully show their potential, but rather that they were bad games. And none of those things will be fixed by improving CPU and GPU performance alone. Plus, some of those games actually got better with updates. Redfall and Forspoken got huge performance improvements, and it's not like some of the most impressive games, such as Baldur's Gate 3 or Alan Wake 2, are running poorly either, proving that good optimization goes a long way. We've never seen such a contrasting philosophy as we do with the Switch. Nintendo's pushing its underpowered system as far as possible, and by all accounts the Switch 2 will be as powerful as a PlayStation 4. Now, I'm not saying there's some evil scheme where devs intentionally make the base model irrelevant once the Pro version comes out. Even in the last gen, the Pro models weren't the best sellers, and I doubt they'll change this time, especially if it's even more expensive. But we constantly hear about how stressful game development is, with crushing deadlines, multiple platforms to support, years of work, and uncertainty about how saturated the market will be when the game finally launches. So let's say your dev team is the same size, but now you have to support an extra console, the PS5 Pro. If before you had a reason to push your team to get the best possible settings and 60 frames per second on the amateur model, Now you might have an excuse to just say the Pro version will get 60 frames per second and the base model will run at 30, and that will extend to the Series X too. I hope I'm wrong, but this could have a negative impact on those who stick with the base model, and it could further mess with development timelines as well. But let's try to be optimistic and look at it from the bright side. More technology is definitely good, especially if it leads to stuff that can also benefit the base model. It could be a positive thing if it extends the current generation's lifespan, but it might also mean we'll have even more cross-gen games in the future, which has its own set of issues. Hopefully we'll finally see a proper price cut on the base PlayStation 5 and Microsoft will follow suit on the Series X. And there's also the case that a mid-gen upgrade allows for a huge boost in marketing for the console, especially now that they'll be able to advertise it as the most powerful console ever. And I get it, there are enthusiasts out there with money to spare who will buy a Pro version without a second thought. But here's the thing, if in 2024 you consider yourself an enthusiast who wants the best possible graphics and performance, and money is not an issue, unless you really value the console experience, you probably shouldn't be looking at consoles anymore, you should be on PC. Consoles used to offer a curated experience for a cycle of 4 to 6 years, which involve accepting certain limitations like the lack of mods and no mouse and keyboard compatibility in exchange for a plug-and-play experience compared to PC gaming, as well as the appeal of exclusives and the evolution of games over that console generation. Now it seems like we're moving towards a model of more frequent hardware upgrades, so who knows, maybe in the next gen we'll have a PlayStation 6, then a PlayStation 6 Pro, and finally a PlayStation 6 Pro Max or whatever they call it, along with a cross-gen period that doesn't seem to be going away. This will fragment the user base across various console versions, likely impacting development costs for studios and contributing to games take even longer to make. Again, it's not like we have to choose one or the other, but the focus on teraflops, frames per second, path tracing and so on might overshadow the importance of game quality and innovation. Meanwhile, Nintendo proves there is another way. They don't have the most impressive hardware, nor the most affordable games, but it goes to show that a strong library can take you a long way. If consoles keep evolving into super fast PCs that can't actually be used as proper PCs, it might just make the decision to switch away from consoles that much easier. I genuinely hope the PlayStation 5 Pro will bring improvements for everyone interested in consoles, whether it's more powerful hardware, advancements in machine learning, Sony's version of DLSS, or even just a significant price drop on the base model. I'm also curious to see how this new and more powerful hardware will be able to push graphics, ray tracing and gameplay even further. I'm just not convinced we have any truly great games that'll take full advantage of it anytime soon. And I know a lot of people will mention GTA 6, but if you think about it from Rockstar's perspective, it probably makes more sense to stick with 30 frames per second for this generation and then release an enhanced version in the next gen, which is likely going to happen anyway. Finally, I can't stress this enough. The main issue in the current gen is not the lack of capable hardware, but rather the lack of meaningful and impactful games and how long it takes to develop them. And that gets even worse when you have older games or indies or Nintendo exclusives that look and play more interesting than some of the huge AAA games we get today. I'm not sure how much money Sony is putting into their PlayStation 5 Pro, but I'd much rather see those resources go towards making the PlayStation 5 backwards compatible with the PlayStation 3, or to come up with a new Jak and Daxter, Sly Cooper, Infamous, MotorStorm or Bloodborne. But those are just my 2 cents, and I'm sure a good part of my audience is actually hyped up for the Pro version. Still, it feels like this generation is just a minor upgrade over the last, or maybe even just a warm-up for the next. And I wouldn't be surprised if the underpowered Switch 2 ends up outselling the PlayStation 5 in both first-party games and overall units sold. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to the channel and leave a like and a comment. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.